Good morning on this Sunday, and thank you so much for joining us here for the first lineup here on Voice of Uganda Radio on this Sunday morning. As always, we appreciate you, and we thank you so much for being a part of our listening audience. Your participation in the conversation and your calls that come in are always welcome. It just helps us to set the tone and set the direction, because not only do we have people in Uganda that are listening to the program, but all of you in the diaspora throughout the world, not just in certain areas. Some areas there are more of you than others, but throughout the world. And we thank you so much for participating and being a part of this program and making us as large as you have made us, giving us a voice and a platform so that we can really have good discussions on what is happening in our beloved Uganda, how we change that, and how we move forward. So we don't take it lightly. We know that we are on the air, and we know that we are becoming the voice that we are becoming because you participate, because you tune in, because you listen, and because you're becoming a part of us moving towards a new Uganda. So I thank you so much for that. This is Miss Brenda on Voice Uganda Radio this morning for Freedom at Hand. I will be here with the Honorable Zoe Bakoko, who will come in just a second and introduce herself, and Madame Dorothy will probably join us a little later on this morning in the program. So thank you so very much for being a part of the discussion that we're going to be having here this morning. Zoe, good morning.
Good morning, Miss Brenda. Good morning, listeners. Good morning, everybody. And good afternoon, wherever you are. Every Sunday, we wake up and to this program. I believe there's a reason for it, and that we are doing this not for ourselves. We're doing it for the generations to come in Uganda. We're doing it because we know that things can be better in our country. We are doing this because we believe that Uganda is big enough for everybody to be living there and coexisting together. And we are doing this because we know it can happen, and that change can be brought around and about by you, the people who come from that country, and our friends and our allies, whether you are in country in Uganda or you're in the diaspora. So I truly feel blessed every Sunday to be able to interact and listen to you. And during this 2 hours program, it's always a blessing. And I'm grateful that you always tune in because you make this possible. Thank you, listeners.
I know, and thank you so much. I echo exactly what Zoe is sharing, what she's saying there. Wednesday, on our Wednesday program, we had started a discussion, and we just felt the need that we needed to continue on in that discussion just a little bit farther. Because as you know, sometimes when we start the conversation, it gets very interested, and then the time is gone before you know it, and we just really didn't have a chance to really talk about and share some of the things even on a deeper level than we wanted to. On Wednesday, on the American Connection, we talked about living in exile. We talked about a lot of what causes people to be in exile and what keeps them in exile. And a lot of times people are in exile for no reason that it isn't their own. Sometimes government can change hands, and things can happen while people are abroad going to school or doing things. When that happens, you're stuck behind the lines. You can't go back home. You're just, you're stuck, and you have to decide what to do, and you have to decide to do what to do quickly. Others we discussed make the choice they want to leave their homeland for religious reasons, for political reasons or opinions, because they're a member of a society that's being persecuted. Categories, there are many different categories as to why people make the decisions to flee their country. So when they make these decisions, they should not be treated as outcasts, because that's not what they are. Unless you really know the reason why someone is having to make those difficult decisions, there's no reason to look down upon them for any reason. We here in the United States just celebrated our independence here on Thursday, the 4th of July. When I look at our independence and I look at all of the struggle of what had to happen for that, I want to talk a little bit about that this morning along with Zoe, because if you really think about it, what I chose to spend the day doing is looking at a lot of the history of the wars and what the fighting and what had to happen for all of this to take place. It is a holiday that we don't take lightly here in the United States of America because we understand the lives that were lost and given for us to have this day. Something that I don't feel is appreciated by the government in Uganda for people losing their lives fighting in a struggle, fighting for freedom, fighting for independence and liberty. It just too many times falls on deaf ear. A lot of these people come back from situations and they're not even put in a position of being praised and thanked for what they've done and how they've served their country. So we have to look at, when we look at exile, we have to look at it from a lot of different angles, because you could say that our military men or whoever that went off to fight or do whatever they are doing, even to this day, living in other countries, which are not their home countries, it's a sort of an exile to bring about change, to bring about something good. So Zoe and I want for us this morning to take a little bit of a different turn to say, if you are living in exile, then what is your role and what are you doing to bring about change for the people of Uganda, for your families that are still in Uganda, and for yourselves? How are we participating in this, and how do we participate as a whole so that we can move forward united to make a difference in how we approach this? So, Zoe, you're here in the United States of America. You're one of those people that are in exile. You're not in exile because of your own choosing. You're in exile because of your love for the country and your love for the people of Uganda, and not wanting to see those people be trampled on and used by the government, taking monies and funds that were given to them for their livelihood someday after they retired. And because of this, the government saw you as betraying them rather than applauding you for standing up for the Ugandan people. Talk to us just a little bit about that as we go on into the rest of the program.
Thank you, Ms. Brenda. We dwelt a lot on Wednesday on the American Connection on why people move out of their countries. People leave their countries to move and live in another country as an exile or as a refugee because they do not feel safe in their own countries. It could be created by a situation, a political situation, conflicts and wars. It could be created by natural disasters. It could be created, by situation that makes somebody to feel unsafe in their own country. And so they move and live in another country. And sometimes it's a very, 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 very difficult decision to leave your own country and move because you have been forced to leave your country. It's not because you want to, because you're a victim and you just have to leave. It doesn't matter whether you move to a country which has a lot of resources or which doesn't. But leaving your country is a very, very difficult and painful decision. And many times you find difficulty in adjusting in your new host country. But many people from Uganda, as we discussed last Wednesday, Ugandans are very entrepreneurial people and very hardworking people, and they find ways of adjusting wherever they live. They work hard, they study, they acquire skills, they acquire knowledge to enable them to live in their new countries, host countries. And that is very, very important, that when you move, whether you're in exile, you're a refugee, you should be able to use the resources available to you to be able to transition in the new country, to acquire knowledge, to acquire skills so that you can work, and eventually in the situation when you go back to your country, then you will be able to apply that knowledge and skills to help develop the country. But while you are outside, you can still help, not just by sending money home, but being able to catalyze our people, raise their consciousness, and raise their inner self and voices to standards that they could expect and from their government and from the country, to standards of accountability that they should be able to ask for. In spite of what happens in countries like Uganda, where people demand for accountability and people ask for the services, and instead of the government listening to them and having a dialogue and a conversation and a discussion, they tear gas the people when they say we don't have health services, our education services are very poor, the agricultural services have been swept down the drain, there's been a lot of corruption, we can't continue like this. And many times, if you are lucky, you can be alive like me, but leave your country and live in another country in spite of the hardships or the good. But if you are unlucky, you can die, like the former member of parliament, Ms. Nebanda Aliuru, who was killed mysteriously. And as we know of today, even the guy who was accused for being responsible and sent to jail for 4 years has now been totally acquitted, something which was expected. If you are unfortunate, like Mayor Lukwago, you will be shut out of your office, denied your right to be in your elective office and do the work and serve the people who elected you, and tear gassed and beaten like a criminal every time you want to go and speak to your people. If you are not lucky to be able to live in the diaspora or in exile, you will be tortured. And we had a lot of stories on Freedom at Hand, Voice of Uganda Radio yesterday, testimonies of people who have been tortured, people who are in jail just because of asking for accountability. And so these are some of the things that happen. But living in exile, as I said, the most important thing you can do is to acquire more skills, acquire more knowledge, which you can eventually apply in your country to develop it. Meanwhile, while you are here, you can do what we are doing now. Raise the consciousness of the people to standards which they should expect and ask for accountability from their government so that you can create feasible change and be able to live in a country which is enough for everybody. And I believe a country like Uganda should be enough for everybody, big enough for everybody. And there should be no reason for anybody to live outside of that country unless they are going to work, to study, and be able to come back and contribute or live wherever they want by choice.
Yeah, so, and going on with a lot of what you're saying here, with those in exile, you said it very well. People are forced out for many different reasons, which you just showed there, even not being able to work in elected positions within the country, not being able to do their jobs, not being able to hold the government accountable. When you start talking about things like this and you start talking about it to the diaspora community, which is some of the most hardworking people I know live in the diaspora, let's not paint this pretty picture of being a part of the diaspora community. You are somehow larger than life. Because a lot of people that live in the diaspora have given and sacrificed a lot to be in the diaspora. Living completely away from your family, because as we understand and know, some people are with their families in the diaspora, but there are a lot of people that are individuals and that are alone. They come, they work, some of them 2 to 2.5 jobs, so that they can send money and fund monies back home. The only way they can talk to their family is through the internet or phone or whatever. They don't get to embrace them, hug them, sit down and have dinner with them like the rest of the world does. The diaspora community suffers tremendously, no matter where they're at, Zoe, and you can comment on this. I don't care if you're in the United States, the UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, no matter where you're at in the free world, when you are there alone and you're the lone survivor that's working and struggling to pay tuitions back home, medical expenses back home, and all the things that are required, that the family looks to you to help them because there is no other help from the government, it can really be a very, very lonely place. And I think a lot of these people in the diaspora suffer a quietness that slowly eats away at them on the inside because they're by themselves. They can have friends, they can have acquaintances or whatever. They can make the best lives for themselves out here that they want to, but it tells you deep within your heart and within your soul, no matter who you are, that these people have a genuine love for their country and for their families because of the monies that flood back into the country out of the diaspora community. Wouldn't you say, Zoe?
Well, you're absolutely right, Miss Brenda. Just leaving your country and moving away is not an easy decision. And moving into another country, as I said, you have to transition. And in a situation like that, it's like losing somebody. And if you lose somebody you love, what happens? You have to bereave. You have to mourn. You have to go through that process and until you get a healing where you now say, okay, I accept I lost this person and I'm going to have to deal with it. This happens generation to generation. You know, the people, our great-great-grandparents are not here because that's human life cycle. And so that is exactly what happens. Even if you came out here for happiness to study, you know, the excitement of having the scholarship and going out to study is rife when you leave your country. But 1 month into the new country, you begin to feel that difference of separation. You are alone. You don't have the kind of culture and community back in Africa where everybody is there for everyone. And, you know, you have a support system. You have a communal system. But out here, you are by yourself. Even if you have family, Miss Brenda, there are people who live in one home. They don't even know what's happening to the other because everybody is busy either going to school or going to work, and they don't see each other. And so you have to change to that culture of a different culture where people are just running and running and running and working so hard. And many times it can be too much for other people. And many people, like I said before, Ugandans, they are very entrepreneurial, they are very hardworking, and they adjust. They're able to adapt to the situation. But there are people who find it very difficult to change and adapt to these situations. It is a harsh environment. Secondly, the climate is a different climate. You have 4 seasons here. Back home, we probably just have 2 seasons. There's a dry season, which is a little warmer, and then there's a wet season when there's a lot of rain. We don't have snow, extreme weathers with the hurricanes and all this kind of stuff. We don't have all this, but you have to adjust to all this. You have to buy clothes for a different season. You have to adjust to the humidity. And so the body alone has to change to a lot of things. And that is why I will always give credit to Ugandans who come to these countries and they are able to make successful lives and be able to help and sacrifice and help people home. And it is just unbelievable that a government like the one we have in Uganda cannot appreciate the importance of the diaspora. Last week, I will say this again. When I was in the UN knows that for us to have stability in the countries which have a lot of conflict and a humanitarian crisis, we have to involve the diaspora, and that the diaspora is going to be very, very critical in what we do. So I know that we have a huge role to play in making our countries better, and
Yes.
coming together as the diaspora from different backgrounds and from different skills and levels of skills and knowledge, we can
Yes.
make a difference in our countries.
Most definitely. We have a call, so let's go ahead and go to this caller real quick. Hey, caller, introduce yourself and come on in.
Yes, good morning, Miss Brenda. Good morning, Honorable Zoe Bakoko. My name is Musana, and I always call in at this time because of my duties. Later on, as time goes on, I usually don't have time to call. That's why I call so early.
Well, we thank you for your calls.
Yes, today's topic is such a great topic. Yes, we are talking about Ugandans in diaspora, how we suffer at the hands of one man for almost 30 years. But we also have to understand that the Ugandans within Uganda, they also live in diaspora, whatever that means. People in Uganda, they are in exile within their own country. The government in Uganda has taxed them to death, including in necessities such as water, such as buying flour for their meals. Everything is taxed. Actually, people in Uganda, they are suffering so much, as well as people in the diaspora. The only thing is that people in Uganda, they are fighting tooth and nail to change the situation, despite the circumstances. And we people who are in the diaspora, we are just waiting something to happen. In reality, people who are in the diaspora, we have the capacity to change things in Uganda. By saying we have the capacity, perhaps people think that you must have so much money in order to get involved to change the way the country, the direction of your country is headed. No, you do not. People in Uganda, people who are in diaspora, if you're not being selfish, we could change the government in a minute. We send so much money to Uganda. And first of all, when we ask people to contribute money to our cause, to make sure that we get things back the way they are, people, especially in the diaspora, they're the first one to point a finger. Oh, they're going to take my money. Oh, they're going to do this. They're going to do this. Knowing very well that when they send money, for example, you send $100 to people, to your family back at home, Museveni will take $5 out of that and pocket it. And he knows that he's doing it. And you know that he's doing it. And there is nothing you can do to stop. So I argue all our fellow Ugandans in the diaspora to come together. Let's put one and two together to get rid of this government. Our people have suffered for so long, and nobody is gonna come and liberate our nation. It is our own selves that we have to take this bull by the horns and get rid of this crazy man who has been in power for almost 30 years. Now, I want to talk about, I'm going to veer a little bit on the events that are taking place in Uganda right now. You saw what happened, where the government of Uganda brought a lot of its own military people, and they put a lot of these, army men in the streets wearing army fatigue, ready for battle, dressed in as if they are going to war in the bushes. You've seen pictures. Amin never did that. Museveni is doing this to intimidate people because he knows that his days are gone. And the people in Uganda, they are on their tenterhooks. And any time a revolution will happen. Museveni is putting his troops in Uganda, in the city, on the pretense that because they were terrorists, that's why he bracketed the city, not only in the city, but also in the other parts of Uganda, like Masaka. Now, you tell me, how can a terrorist move from Entebbe, go to the city, and then go to Masaka, where they were going door to door, trying to find out where the terrorist is. We have some news that a lot of people in the army left or have run away, and Museveni is on pressure to find those people. That is why Museveni did this, to go and look for these people who are supposed to have run away from the army because they ran away with the weapons. Now he's again at his stupid games telling Ugandans, oh, it is terrorists. And then they ended up bringing this guy from Somalia, who they said, oh, this was a terrorist because he was dressed like a woman. Give me a break. Also, finally, last night, Saturday, there was heavy fighting in Toro. According to what we've got, a lot of people went and subdued the police station, and according to their naked lies, the government, that they only stole 5 guns. But they were able to go and attack a heavily fortified military base in that region. And they put up a fierce fight. And Museveni is telling us that they stole these 5 weapons, they went to this army barracks, and they put up a fierce fight with the 5 guns stolen from police. Ugandans have suffered so much. Enough is enough. Museveni has used these tactics of killing people since 1986, going to door, setting up these no-sense, useless operations, Wembley operations, telling people, those who were in the army, in different political, different like Kaila's outfit. Yes, telling these people that you have assignment, and they end up being taken that assignment, and they end up being killed. We have a murderer, and I don't care how much you slice it. Those who have not read the articles we put on FADU website, you go and read it. Museveni has been killing people since 1971, and that is a fact. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you so much, Musana, for your call. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I know that Zoe probably has a lot to comment on that, but Zoe, answer this for me. One of the things he says is absolutely true. People are fleeing from the military. People are fleeing into spaces of freedom, looking for others that they can unite with in Uganda to start bringing liberation back into their country. The government will have us believe that, oh, these are small incidents, oh, we're not worried about them, oh, we're not threatened by them. But the fact that he feels the need to put more military people out there to say, this is what will happen to you, to still continue to keep the threat alive, to keep the fear alive in the hearts of the Ugandan people. Ugandan people are not fearful anymore. They are tired, as Musana just said, and they're ready to get their lives back. They're tired of living in exile from their own country. They're tired of their families living in exile outside of the country, and they're taking the country back little by little. Comment on that and some of the things Musana had to say, if you will.
We are always grateful to our brother, Mr. Musana, because he just injects a lot of strength and energy into this discussion. You know, Ugandans, as he said, who are living within Uganda, I just gave you a few examples earlier of people like the Lord Mayor, what happened to Miss Nabanda, and, you know, they are internally, what you call internally displaced people. They are as much in exile within their country as we are outside of our country. And the cost is to life, the pain, and is all the same, because you are not even given the freedom to exercise your right within your country. And there's nothing more infuriating. At least when you are outside, you know you are being pushed outside by the government, forced. But to be within the country and not be able to do the things that you are supposed to freely, you are an elected leader and you are not even allowed to sit in your office just with impunity. This guy does that. He pushes people out. He puts all these military people to man all these positions in villages like the NADS agricultural programs. the Gisos, everybody militarizing the whole country. Why does he militarize the country? Because he's afraid of his own shadow. And like Mr. Musana said, Museveni is seeing soldiers. His soldiers, he thought the people whom he controlled, because he now doesn't control the community. He doesn't control the population. The youth are out of control. He can't control them. The women are asking questions. The men are asking questions. And now he thought he controls the soldiers, and now he can't control them because the soldiers are deserting too. And now the only thing he's doing is to throw all these army dressed up in the. I mean, you could see as if Uganda was at war with some other country. Because if you have two people whom you call terrorists, and one dressed like a woman, as the reporter, the woman in the salon had reported, and they discovered these two people were men. I mean, the story is completely fake because it doesn't add up. How do you see a woman, a man dressed like a woman going to a saloon to do her nails or his nails in a country where a law has been passed and people are being banned for homosexuality? A man could dress in a woman's clothing in Uganda, go and do his nails. Where was this man coming from? But he was so ignorant, he didn't know that a law like that has been passed. Museveni wasn't putting that show only to put fear in Ugandans. Museveni was putting that show because he knows he's losing the last people who have sustained him in power, his allies. Because without the show of terrorism, Museveni cannot be in power.
Yes, exactly.
All the allies just need to know that you can have a better alternative to Museveni. Museveni has not controlled anything in the region, even though you think he is sustaining security in the region. He's actually escalating the situation. I don't know if you read the article on Black Star News, which was not written by a Ugandan, but by somebody from this country, where he was saying that these dictators in Africa who have been there for so many years, and he gave names like the Mugabes and he says these and people like Museveni who were seen as dynamic and the upcoming leaders are now going down and becoming dictators. And if they don't take the situation, the warning did not go to Uganda alone. It was going to the allies too. It was going to the diaspora to say that Uganda could sink back into another war. And that should not happen. And Museveni is looking for outlets to try and prove that his government is threatened by terrorists. And if it comes down, that the U.S. will have no ally. There's nobody who is, let me tell you, Miss Brenda, there's nobody who lives for life.
Yes.
And supposing Museveni died today, wouldn't Uganda exist? Wouldn't the relationship between the U.S. and the West and Uganda continue when we have a new leader in Uganda, and probably a better leader, because not a murderous leader like Musana was saying, who is rampaging and killing people all over the place. We have seen what happened in Rwanda, and his friend in crime, Kagame, continuously saying, lifting him and glorifying Museveni for all those people who died. And they thought that they would kill all those Rwandese and blame it on other people. But the ghosts are coming out to haunt them. People are talking about it. If you read the articles, you will find out that every time now, what happened in Rwanda crawls to Kagame and back to Museveni. What happened in Congo crawls to Kagame and back to Museveni.
Yes, and I think, let me just say this, because this was an interesting point you made about the youth. one of the things we know that maybe he doesn't know is that controlling your teenagers and controlling the youth is, as their parents, you have another thing coming because they have some of the strongest wills and the strongest minds of all of us. And even them within their youth, that he thought he could put them in positions or give them a little clout here and there to make them think that he's gonna use them or they're gonna be powerful in his government. They're even turning against him. You know, the military, those that are fleeing and starting to form on their own and starting to come back and steal and take what they need to take in order to protect themselves. They're starting to send a strong, strong message to this government. And I think a lot of the reason why Voice Uganda Radio, a lot of the other medias that are out there that are trying to get the attention of the Ugandan people is to say, look, now is the time. This is the place and now is the time. You have the compassion of the world on your side. What are you doing? Whether you're in exile in the country or outside of the country, what are you doing to bring about change? Because Zoe, let me just say this honestly. We have so many Ugandans in the diaspora that are so worried about their families, how they will eat, how they will go to school, how they will live, how they will provide and be taken care of, that they're forgetting the biggest point here. If this man decides to throw a war for no reason at all of the things you worry about now are out the window. There is no way you're going to be able to protect your families. Everything in the government will shut down. The monies that are so important for you in the diaspora to send home to your families, you will not be able to send that money anyway. So like Musana said, and Zoe, even a little of what you're saying, what are we doing in the diaspora community to build a stronger foundation to bring about a new Uganda? Because the things that you worry about now, I have said this time and time again on the American Connection, little by little, this man will slowly take and drain the power of those in the diaspora, refugee, exile, whatever you want to call them. He will slowly start to drain that away from the people. He holds the control. We think we have the control now because, we can still send money. We can provide for our families. Every 3 to 5 years we can go home to Uganda to see people or to whatever. But this man holds the control of what we are outside the country in the palm of his hands. And we are allowing him to get stronger and stronger day by day instead of uniting, coming together, giving to a cause in which we're trying to move Uganda forward. Go ahead, Zoe.
Of course, Miss Brenda. I mean, just sending that money home. As Mr. Musana said, he takes $5 out of your money. People are sending billions and billions of shillings. And that is the money. You are making him stronger. Not just because you are sending money for your families to pay school fees and feed them. Because that money is what sustains him in power. He gets part of that money. And secondly, he sows it back here in the diaspora to sow discord among the people. He has people who are working so hard out here to create confusion and discord among the people in diaspora, to cast doubt on other people, to be suspicious of each other, and to create, instead of creating cohesion, he's still using his divide and rule, which he uses back home to divide the diaspora. And so people have to learn this man's tricks and understand what he's doing. And let me tell you, you said he controls everything in his palm. And how very true, because he takes your money, which you send home, because you pay it for school fees, it still goes to his government.
Exactly.
You pay it for food, you buy that food, the taxes still go to his government. You are sustaining his government. We in the diaspora are sustaining his government because people at home are suffering so much, and the suffering is, as Mr. Musana said, it's like you are living in exile within your country. And for me, I still go back. I think the diaspora has a huge role to play in making the West understand that they can have a better leader in Uganda, a better one. Because Museveni is not in control, as I was saying. Look at Somalia. Nothing has happened. It's going to 10 years since I had the UN gave me an award for the dialogue and the engendering the Somali peace process. Things were getting better then, and now they are getting worse. You still have the terrorists going to blow up vehicles in front of parliament in Somalia. How does that happen?
Exactly.
You have the Ugandan, you have Museveni in control. You think you trust Museveni. He is the only one who is creating some level of security according to the West, according to their foreign policy. How can Museveni be the best when there's no peace at all within that region? He could not be the best. You can have better allies, people who will work for both our interests, the interest of the West and the interest of Africa and Uganda. People who will be towing and understanding the importance of liberty, the importance of freedom, the importance of independence for their populations, and not to treat people as second-class citizens within their country, what Museveni is doing. And for me, somebody really must convince me that whatever is happening in Uganda, all these so-called terrorist fear which is being raised, it's not because they are terrorists in Uganda. It's because Museveni is fearing his shadow. He knows that he's getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and he wants to try and get attention of both the West and of Ugandans, that he still exists and that he still needs the help of the West. The West should not abandon him because he has been their loyal dog doing all the work for them. So he's looking for that kind of option. And then for these things that are happening where they are sending people door to door, they are looking for ways of accusing people so that they can start killing Ugandans in the name of that some soldier deserted from your home, so they go and terrorize you in your house and then create this confusion in your house or kill some people, torture people.
But
he is creating all these stories, and I wish it was true that all these people are rising up and that things are going to change in Uganda.
Most definitely. But let me just say this, Zoe, to what you were just saying there. He had allies in the West. We confided in him. We trusted him. We gave him the monies. We gave him the funds to run behind these ghost soldiers and all of these things. At some point, we're going to start to open our eyes and see that nothing is changing, nothing is happening. That does this man really have our interests at heart or not? Because when you start to treat the American people the same way you treat the Ugandan people, we have a voice, and our voice will be heard. And whether it takes back what we're doing, do it at a lesser level, however we do it, let me tell you, we have gotten his attention. And he knows and he understands loud and clear the power in which we've given him. That same power, we can take that power away because, like you just said, what the West knows is there are other leaders that can be great in Uganda, and long after Museveni's gone, there will be great leaders that will move that country forward, that the United States of America will be able to work with, and other countries as well, to their interests, so that their interest is at heart, but also the interests of the Ugandan people, because somewhere all of that has fallen apart, not only just in the interests of this country and other countries, but in the interests of the Ugandan people as well. I wanted to make another comment from something that you had said there too, and it's this. This man has sent people to be exiled outside of the country for a purpose that is none other than, like you say, to bring some kind of diversion in the diaspora. We know that they're there, that we know that they're his eyes and his ears, and we know in the diaspora that we have to be very, very careful. If he was not threatened by what's going on, he can get on the air, he can go to the newspapers and say all he wants. That I have friends in Russia, I have friends in China. He knows that they are not on board with him if the United States back away. I don't care who he runs to, they're not going to back him. when he sends his peons, or whatever we want to call them, his people out in exile to keep an eye on the diaspora, that should infuriate those of you who are living in the diaspora, who are refugees or in exile outside of your country. The audacity of this man, that not only has he thrown you out of your beloved country, but now he comes into the countries in which you try to live peacefully amongst the people who have accepted you, and he causes problems and frictions within that. Let me tell you, if there is a day to rise up against Uganda and rise up against what is happening, not only to the people in Uganda, the government, those who are elected officials in their positions that are not allowed to carry out those positions, to what's happening in the United States of America, we need to come together and we need to unite. Like Zoe said, out of your money that goes into Uganda from the diaspora, this man keeps $5 of all of your money that goes in there. If you think about your money in the terms of billions, that's hundreds of millions of dollars that you continue to give to this man. And the day is going to come when he is going to cut you off from the people that you love, because it will no longer matter to him. It will all be about his own survival at whatever cost. We are telling you now to rally up and get behind Freedom and Unity Front, Federal Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda, Voice of Uganda Radio, because we have started a movement into a new Uganda to bring about change for the Ugandan people, to give them back their right in true democracy. We have our hands extended out to say, help us to move forward. If you do not help us now, we cannot help you later, because you cannot run to Voice of Uganda Radio. You cannot run to the Federal Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda. You cannot run to those in Freedom and Unity Front to say, help us. They're killing our families. They're taking away everything that we have left, because you will tie our hands. We are in a position now to move forward on behalf of the Ugandan people. That window will close and it will not be there forever. We have a caller coming in, and then I'll come back to you, Zoe, for comment on that. Hey, caller, go ahead and introduce yourself and come on in. Caller, come on and introduce yourself and come on in. You're listening to Freedom at Hand here on Voice Uganda Radio.
Okay, Miss Brenda, good to have me. I thank you for having me and for giving me this opportunity to be part of the contributors of this program. My name is Kalimagezi from the United Kingdom, based in Manchester, and I would love to also to say hi to the Honorable Zoe Bakoko. Hello, Honorable Zoe Bakoko. Hope you
Good morning, good afternoon. How are you, Kali?
I'm doing well, my sister and my mother. Okay, I would like to welcome on board our listeners from all the parts of the world, and I would love to thank you guys for having me, and I would love to take this opportunity to express my will and my sympathy to all those who have lost their loved ones. The last time we are not, the last week we haven't been with them. I would love to extend my sympathy and my prayers to those who have lost the ones, for those who are still having the ones in the hospitals, for those who don't have a meal on the table. But I would love also to encourage them to continue praying that God has not deserted them. And I would love to tell them that the liberation is on the way.
Yes.
The Dualist Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda, together with FUF, we are working tirelessly to come and liberate you. So the topic today, Miss Brenda, I think it's about the diaspora, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I would love to go a little bit outside because I wanted to bring this to our listeners and to the panel. I wanted to bring this to the panel and our listeners.
Okay, and go ahead with your question and your comments, because we will be stretched for time here after a while. So go ahead and welcome aboard.
Okay, Miss Brenda, Brenda, I don't know, and I don't know whether Ms. Zoe Bakoko can explain to us what kind of a president we have, because to me, the way I used to take President Museveni, I used to take him as a man of his words, because by the time he came in power, I was a young man doing primary 6. All what he used to say, he used to do then. But Miss Brenda and Miss Zoe Bakoko and the listeners, just a few days ago, President Museveni was in Rwanda opening up the youth conference, the African Youth Conference for Africa. Mm-hmm. And he said these words. He said that infrastructure development, such as roads, electricity, railway, are important to attract investment in the country. So I just want to know, or to ask this question, or to ask you guys over there, this guy, has he realized this thing yesterday, today, a few days ago? Because he has been in Uganda, or his regime has been in Uganda for the last, how many years, if I'm not mistaken? 28, 29 years, isn't it?
Yes. And let me let Zoe answer that, because before you go any further, because that is a good answer, because one of the things that we had just said is he's not even listening to the West. Zoe even said it. This is a man who's become unrecognizable. Zoe, answer his question, because you're talking about a man who just enjoys listening to himself talk, because for 30 years he's saying the same things and nothing is changing in the country as far as infrastructure.
You know, Kalina Mugezi, Museveni is not a stupid person. Museveni is a very cunning person. He's not intelligent, but he's very cunning. And what happens with people who are very cunning is they try and do a lot of fireworks and fire brigade work at the same time. What's happened is Museveni knows that the youth have gotten out of control and he cannot get them back. And so he's trying to bring their attention by saying that he's going to open these projects. And when he opens these projects, what's going to happen is he's going to provide jobs which they have been demanding for, that he's going to give them the jobs. He is playing with the psychology and the minds of these young people. That is the kind of person Museveni is. He plays with people's minds. When he reads the red flag, he tries to pretend that he's going to do it. And when that heat subsides, he's not going to get any jobs for these young people. The next thing is he will call them stupid little dogs. He will call them piglets. He will call them anything. That's what Museveni does. But right now he's on heat. He realizes that people, and especially the young people, are hitting back and demanding for their rights, and he can't give it to them. He just didn't realize this yesterday. Museveni works with whatever situation is coming. When Museveni realized the women will be the problem, he appointed Kazibwe as the vice president. The women forgot about everything. Oh, Museveni loves us. And so they jumped on the bandwagon and gave Museveni votes because they thought Kazibwe probably, as a vice president, would become the next president. And so there would be a woman. And so the women were looking in that direction. When he used her and it was enough, he dumped her. And he saw the heat coming from Uganda. If Uganda was not going to give him the votes, that was going to be a problem. He appointed Bukenya, the vice president. The Baganda were quiet. Oh, we are going to be into things and eating. And when he realized that he had used him and he was not any threat anymore, he dumped Bukenya. That's the kind of person you are looking at. Museveni is a very manipulative and calculative, cunning, stupid man. And he does all these things for a reason, for himself, not for anybody else. He didn't realize yesterday that all this infrastructural development is actually what brings development. He didn't realize it yesterday. He denied us the opportunity for a road. People fought from West Nile. We fought in Parliament for him to give us that road. and it only stopped in Arua. He didn't even take the roads up to the villages. If you go to countries like Nigeria and other countries, you find that roads are developed and built up to the villages. You have functional railway systems. But in Uganda, he found that the country had functional railway systems. He sustained the war in the north until the railway system broke down completely. We used to have a railway system all the way to Pakwach, and that is not there anymore. People would plant, and a lot of food came to Kampala and down to Kasese or wherever through those railways, the trains. He broke that down completely. Now he's seeing it as something which he can revamp. The systems were there. It's not like they were not there. I remember my brother, who God rest his soul, he was studying in Mbale, and we used to put him on the train, and they used to travel to Mbale on a train in the 70s when Idi Amin was in power. I was then a young nurse in Butabika, and I would put my brother to go to Mbale on a train and back when he came for holidays. So Museveni, what is he talking about? He just saw this today? No, he's lying.
Yes, and I think that answers the first part of that question you had there. Go ahead and finish up with your questions you have for Zoe.
Yeah, okay. And then I was just bringing some of these comments in order for the listeners, in order for us to see that the man who is driving us is out of mind. Okay, he went on to argue the youth to be in touch with the old people. And this is the man you can see who is dividing the youth and the old. Anyway, and he went on to blame the colonial masters for waging wars in Africa. Miss Zoe and Miss Brenda and the listeners, you can see the wars we went and attacked Rwanda, we went to Congo, we went to Somalia, we went to Southern Sudan, we went to I don't know how many places. So
Central African Republic. To Kenya.
See a man who is doesn't preach, who doesn't do what he's preaching. So I really don't understand this. So let me close this chapter by telling my fellow Ugandans and the listeners that the answer is remaining to us. It is us to choose who is who. Now let me go to the main topic of the diaspora. Miss Brenda, this is a very interesting topic. I really, really love this topic because I came in the diaspora when I was 15 years. I've never enjoyed my teenagership in Uganda. I have been in diaspora for all my years. I got all my children, I got all my education in diaspora. So what I have seen, Miss Brenda and Miss Zoe, we have got classes of people who are coming to the diaspora. And I think I spoke about this thing on this radio. We have people who come to the diaspora to look for greener pasture. How? We have the people who are termed as the Cheyo people. I don't know how to put that one in English. And we have people who are being forced to get out of Uganda, like you, Miss Zoe Bakoko. You understand? You were being forced by someone because you had life in Uganda, but you were forced to abandon the life you had in Uganda to come. So, and we have a person who is in Uganda who is struggling, who has been struggling to bring bread to the table. And now he is being promised that if you go to England, if you come to America, if you go to Kuwait, if you come to the Scandinavia, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, and you will get something. And bear in mind that this person, where he comes from, or where he has been, he has never had education. It does not mean that when you have education, you have knowledge. No, that's a no. He has been surrounded by an environment that is not developmental. So when that person comes here in the diaspora, he continues with such kind of a life. He can work, he can obtain the permits to remain in the country, he can continue with kind of life. That's why when I heard my brother talking about those kind of people, those are the ones who, when they come here, they try to copy the lifestyle of the people here. The way they dress, the way they don't symbolize. But Miss Bakoko and Miss Brenda, when you see people who are coming from China, people who are coming from Israel, I want to give you an example of the Israel. They know they have built their country, even though they are doing it on a negative way. But they know that because of the diaspora people, that's why their country has to survive. Mm-hmm. But we Ugandans, when we reach the diaspora, we want to behave like the British. I can see here Ugandans who want, when they come here, they even change the tone. They don't even want to teach their children Luganda or Lusoga or Lunyankore or whatever, or Acholi. You understand? They abandon their cultures and norms and traditions. So, fellow Ugandans, in order to achieve what we are looking for, we have to go back to the drawing tables and we sort out ourselves. Because there is a website here, Miss Brenda, I want you to note it down, and Miss Zoe Bakoko. I don't know if this brother is from, I don't know whether he's from Denmark, I don't know whether he's from, where is called Kakensa Henry. Mm-hmm. You can see the kind of things he's putting on his wall. They are really, really, really sabotaging. They are really, they are killing the society. They are putting people with people who are buying cars, people who are stealing people's wives, people who are dealing. You see, such kind of things which are not developmental. We need things that will even.
I understand the answer that you're the question that you're asking us, and I want to go to Zoe here just for a second. But let me make this comment because I understand exactly what you're saying. It happened here in the United States of America when you had slaves who were. I won't say they were raped because a lot of them, maybe in the beginning they were, but they started to have relationships with their masters. The children that they had, some of those...
Educative moment in so many ways. But the one singular message that I would like to say to the members of the diaspora is that they have to look around very quickly and see the kind of environment that we live in and realize that there is a better place to be. You look at a country like Uganda that is known as the Pearl of Africa historically, and you look at it and with its beautiful environment, with its rich soil, but it cannot sustain its people. And then you cross over to the farthest countries like Sweden, which are under snow for half the year, but they sustain their people. And you need to use that as a lesson to ask yourself, what is wrong with our country? And I think if we start looking at things from that critical perspective, we might even be able to overcome what the regime in Uganda has used for the last 28 years. The regime in Kampala, one of its biggest and largest assets is fear-mongering. They have decided to deliver fear into the soul of people. And if you look at the recent deployment of soldiers in Kampala, in military fatigue, it's all geared towards instilling fear amongst the people. And Museveni does this purposely. It's within his political ideology to instill fear so that people are cowed down, they are intimidated, everything they think of doing, they are scared of what Museveni might be doing. So So the diaspora has to break out of this prison of fear, because for some of us, there are people who cannot even talk to us when we attend functions, because they are worried that if they are seen with us, they cannot travel to Uganda and do what they want to do. So I think there is a major need for us to look into our people and educate them that actually excessive fear is making them a prisoner of who is not in jail, but who is in a bigger jail. We need to inform the people in the diaspora that they contribute almost a third of the national budget in Uganda.
And that's big. That's big.
Yes. But what is the return on that investment? Because you keep on sending money home, which you could use for so many other resources. Because I see people here in the diaspora, and everyone you talk to, they are paying tuition for at least 3 children at the minimum. They are buying food. They are buying medical supplies. They are paying for services that are supposed to be provided by the government. And if you look into that very critically, you realize that a lot of your income is being robbed away from you by the state machinery in Uganda. Now, they've just hiked the rates of the percentage of money that they take off any international money transfer to be able to meet their personal greed. All that is money that the diaspora needs to protect, because it's their hard-earned money. So here comes the responsibility. Those of us in the diaspora, we have a voice. We can speak. We can gather resources. I can tell you, if out of, let's say, the approximately 70,000 Ugandans I gather in the US who are registered here in the US, if every one of them was to raise, just for example, to raise $5 a month, 5 times 70,000, how much would that money do in regards to facilitating the process of democratization? Even if we are going to look at some simple process of giving a group or a section of Ugandans a voice. Most of the people in the diaspora here are actually young people. They are people who have run away from Uganda, mainly because many of them cannot find employment. So why can't we start to construct the road to return us back home? We don't need to fear that if we contribute towards the struggle for democratization of Uganda, the government is going to be watching you. Yes, Museveni is watching. Yes, they've sent people in the diaspora to spy on some individuals. But that fear is actually constructed by the government. Recently, somebody called me up and asked me, we understand you're working with the seducer. And I said, yes, what does that mean? And he was telling me that, seducer is still working with us. So I asked him a few questions. This person did not even know what town seducer lives in London, and yet he's claiming that seducer is working with them. Mm-hmm. So they are there to sow all these seeds of fear, that we fear each other, that they don't want me to be talking to Zoe Bakoko, they don't want me to be talking to seducer. When you mention Gilbert Bukenya, everyone you mentioned, they're trying to send out these messages of confusing us in the diaspora.
Yes.
So we need to be very solid on the ground where we stand and decide that we are going to be moving forward as a unit. I can tell you that the people on the ground in South Africa, when they were fighting apartheid, did a wonderful job. But on the other hand, it was the people in the external wing who were outside. Those of you who are from Uganda, you saw some of them are actually still living in the areas of Kansanga, others are still there in Mityana. These were younger people who came, who were in exile, who worked very hard. Winnie Mandela was visiting them every time and mobilized them, and eventually they forced the trend in South Africa. They were in Mozambique, they were outside the country. And we in the diaspora, we have a voice. We can speak out. We can resist. The people back home do not have that opportunity today.
Yes.
And if we don't, like they say in the U.S. Marine, if we don't cap GM, seize the moment and move forward to eradicate Musevenism and Museveni himself and make them a factor, not to be a factor in our political arena, we are betraying this country. Culturally in Africa, when somebody makes an alarm, when their house is on fire, and you stay in your bed and you don't go to their rescue, you are equally to blame as the person who set the house on fire. So we cannot sit here and be in the comfort that was actually created by major fights, by major struggles. Those in Europe, the democracy in England is a result of the 30-year war. Here in America, it was a fight from the Civil War. Wherever you are, the people have fought for these liberties and the freedoms. And we need those of us in the diaspora to wake up and move forward. Because we are going to even be looked at as people who abandoned our own. And that is a very negative image in the eyes of our hosts in the diaspora. So we need to be very committed. We need to step away from fear, because the fear we have is constructed by Museveni intentionally. I will give you a few examples. For instance, Museveni did not kill Andrew Kayira because he was bothering him politically or anything. He killed him for symbolic purposes. Here was a guy who had an equal and a balancing act militarily and politically. So Museveni very early violently kills Kayira. For some years, I talked to so many political leaders in Uganda, and one of them told me very, very clearly. I asked him, why don't we organize a demonstration and face Museveni head on? And he told me, and this is in the early 90s, and he told me that, my son, if Museveni could kill Kayira with all his military muscle, how about me, who is only carrying a pen and a paper? So in that way, Museveni was achieving his goal, that he killed Kayira for symbolic purposes. Then you move on. For instance, there was an incident in October 1996, which we usually call the Namukola incident, okay? Part of the Panyimol incident that started the war in northern Uganda. The soldiers who had come from UFM and FEDEM refused to kill the Acholis. And when they refused, under the instructions of Ikondere, Museveni gathered these people, put them in trailer wagons, sealed the wagons, and drove them to Mbuya and allowed about 93 people to die of suffocation. And from that day on, whenever you talk to the people who were in the army who had left UFM and fed them, they were saying, no, Museveni will kill us. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this kind of creating these images and creating fear, this is his art. And it straight out comes from the Machiavelli, it comes from the prince, which Museveni has been implementing in Uganda. In there, it's very clear that if you do evil maximally. If you do good in installments so that they can come back to you for the same good. But for evil, you do evil that they don't forget your capacity to do evil. And this is where Museveni is standing. And my brother Kalimagezi was talking about him sweet talking, and let me again step back and go to the Holy Scriptures here and say the devil has a sweet language. When it wanted to tempt the Son of God, it showed him cities and said, I will give you all that. The people of Uganda must stop listening to the tongue of the devil and realize and start working their way forward, and everything comes from sweat. Nothing is going to come to us. Democracy, freedom, and liberty. It's not like a breakfast meal that you walk into a diner, you pick up a menu, and you say, give me this. Okay? It's not like a driving up into McDonald's and they say, give me number 5. No. If you are going to eat some good food, you have to get into the kitchen, buy good health products, and cook it. This is a time to cook freedom, prepare a good meal for us to live on that will give us a perfect life. Otherwise, we are going to be toiling in danger under this regime. We must cook something good that we are going to serve ourselves, but we can't get into the dining hall or in the kitchen until we remove this regime. Thank you, sisters. Thank you for your program.
Thank you so much. And let me just remind all the listeners before I come back to you, Zoe, that you are listening to Miss Brenda and the Honorable Zoe Bakoko here on Voice Uganda Radio at Freedom at Hand on this Sunday. That was a loaded message there, Zoe, and I'm sure you had some things to comment in there on. So go ahead, let me go to you and with a follow-up from what Lawrence just had to share.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Brenda, and I want to thank Lawrence for his contribution. He has, of course, reiterated the statement that we in the diaspora can make a difference, and we know that we can make a difference. And earlier on, the Kalimagezi spoke about the people in this country or in the West who come because they are looking for greener pastures, and they are called Cheyo people. Of course, why did Museveni and his people coin that word Cheyo? It is supposed to make you who is in the diaspora feel dirty and different, that you are toiling, you are doing all these dirty jobs, because that is what they think. That's how they think about people who go out, in spite of the fact that your money is the one which is sustaining him. It always has to, for him, he always has to have a gist to something and make it look like, to make you feel, not just the fear, but also to make you feel inhuman, to make you feel ashamed of what you are doing, in spite of the fact that the money from the diaspora is sustaining his government, not just from the taxes he takes out of your money to sustain his government, but as the speakers have said, you send this money to pay school fees, it sustains his government. You send because the children then go to better schools and they perform better, and you are sustaining him. You send money to look for medicine, to buy health services, because he cannot provide services for the community, and you pay for those services. And so you make his government look better, because the people are getting this health care which you buy, and it makes it look as if the country has good health care. It doesn't. And so people in the diaspora cannot stop to send money home, because the monies they are sending home are sustaining people and keeping them alive. If you don't send the money for the medical care, your person dies. If you don't send the money for school fees, your kids are the ones who are left out. The Museveni's have their money. They will always get the best education for their people. And so this diaspora is actually the one making a difference in Uganda. And they will not stop, because the money they send is dire need for the people back home. And so the only thing we can do is, with this money we are sending, to demand for things that can be done. The diaspora should be voting, and there should be no discussion about that, because they are, as Lawrence said, a third of the budget in Uganda is sustained by the diaspora. And so if we are doing that, then the diaspora has a right to vote back home. And that is one way the diaspora, could be making its voice known. Number two.
And which is one of the things we understand in the new Uganda that has to happen, right?
That's true. We will do that in the new Uganda. And the other thing is, the diaspora has a voice. We can come together here. And if we come together and raise our voice to the host countries where we are, our voices will be heard. We will be recognized, and we can be a pressure group which can put in on a lot of pressure from Museveni and his group. And also for the allies to know that we have a serious group which really wants a better Uganda, not just a change of arms or a change of government. We want a sustainable, good governance and democracy in the country. We want the future generations to enjoy the sweat and what we are doing today to cause change in Uganda.
Something to that theme of the diaspora. First of all, you talked about life in exile, and I can testify myself that life in exile is always painful. And I'll give you two contrasting examples to illustrate my point and to lead me to the second point, which is even more important. The first example is that of Janet Museveni. Some of you may have read her book, My Life's Journey. And in that book, she describes her life in exile. It was painful. She first went into exile in 1972, lived in Kenya, and then they went to Tanzania, to England, and then to Tanzania. And life was not easy. Now, if anybody knows how painful life in exile is, I think Janet Museveni does, or should understand that. In 1981, she again had to go to exile, because that's when her husband Museveni started the Bush War. And she almost she was protesting. She was saying, I'm not going into exile again. She was not willing to do so, but because her life was in danger, she had to go. She sent two of her children by road with a friend, and then went with one of the youngest, took the flight from Entebbe to Nairobi. Now, when she describes the lives in fact, she had to leave Kenya to go to Sweden because it was insecure. So, in other words, life in exile is not all pleasure, it's not all enjoyment, it's painful. And I think Janet Museveni should know it. And if she does, I think she should talk to her husband and say, the conditions you are creating to force people to go into exile are not appropriate, and they are wrong. And so that's the reason why I always talk about political behavior being created, mainly generated by personality and ideology, is the fact that in spite of the knowledge they have, Museveni and Janet Museveni, about life in exile, they still cause people to go into exile. They cannot reflect and say, we have to stop this, because people should not be forced to live and live in exile. I was listening to the Honorable Bakoko last week on Wednesday, and she was the very sad story she was narrating. Now, the second person to prove that life in exile is actually very painful in a different way is a man called Alexander Solzhenitsyn. This is a Russian who wrote the book called The Gulag Archipelago. This guy, because he disagreed with the Marxism and communism in Russia, he spent a lot of time of his life in the labor camps in the Soviet Union, in Siberia. And in 1974, the U.S. campaigned for his freedom, and he was able to come to the United States. So he lived here as a refugee, and for him, unlike Janet Museveni in exile, he had enough money, and he bought a house in Vermont. But he missed his motherland, where he had been imprisoned for so many years. And as soon as the Soviet regime fell, Alexander Solzhenitsyn went back to Russia. In other words, although he was free in the United States, although he had money, although he was not doing the odd jobs many refugees do in exile, this guy could not wait. He just had Russia. So you can see the contrast. Even when you're in exile and you live comfortably, and there is some psychological pain inflicted on you when you live in exile. The motherland is motherland, and there is no substitute for it. So, refugees, this is my second point. Refugees should have a right to sue the people who cause their status of refugees, because it amounts to deprivation of a right to enjoy life in the motherland. Everybody wants to be in their own motherland. They want to. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how comfortable your job is, how your profession experience. You still you are missing something when you are a refugee. In other words, there is pain and suffering caused by the status of being a refugee, of living outside of your own country, whether you are Janet Museveni or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, living under these very different conditions. So my radical suggestion here is that since there is a right to democracy, and this right to democracy was declared by an eminent author on international law, Thomas Frank, when he published an article in the American Journal of International Law in 1990, that there is a right to democracy. And the right to what does the right to democracy mean? It means that you have a right to freely participate in the governance of your country. And the democracy means equality of all people, freedom of all people, security of all people. So when you are deprived of all those rights, and you are some pain and suffering is inflicted on you, you should have a right to sue. So what I'm trying to calling upon all people living in a diaspora who are refugees is that actually if there is a right to democracy and you are forced to live in exile, well, we should be able to sue the regime in power in Kampala to compensate us for the pain and the suffering we are going through. I don't know how they are going to measure this, but it is enormous. You should also remember that the United Nations has, takes care of refugees. This is an extra cost on the international community, and yet this is caused by regimes like the NRM regime in Uganda. They should be able to pay for the suffering of the refugees and the expenses of the refugees when they are forced to live outside their country. So where do you sue these people? I think you can sue in any municipal court in the United States or in Europe. But I think even more important, we can, as refugees, I think we have a right to bring a class action before the International Court of Justice to be compensated for our suffering, our pain, because we can prove it. And so the communists, or call them Marxists, used to have a slogan, workers of the world unite. Well, what I'm trying to say today is refugees of the world, and in particular Ugandan refugees, unite so that we can sue this regime and be compensated for the pain and suffering. Because I think this is one way of making them wake up that what they are doing is wrong. They are aware of this, because that's why I started with Janet Museveni. In her own book, there is evidence, sufficient evidence to show that exile in her own case was painful. So why shouldn't she understand that another person who is forced to live in exile also suffers the same pain she did, and is raising a family, children like she did in exile? It is painful. So what I'm trying to add to the discussion by Kalimagezi and Lawrence is the fact that the diaspora, I think we can also use another weapon, the legal weapon, to fight the regime in Kampala to seek not only to replace the regime, but to be compensated for the suffering that has been inflicted intentionally, by the way, by the regime, because this right is, I think, recognizable under international law and under any law, because like the GM, those of you who are following the news in the U.S., General Motors has now instituted a process under which they are compensating all people who have been, who have suffered, who experienced suffering and pain, whether they are relatives of survivors, to be paid, to be compensated pain and suffering. And if you can do that, then I think Ugandans, refugees in particular, all of us in diaspora, we should pursue a right to sue this regime in Kampala for to compensate every person who is a refugee who cannot return, who has no choice but to stay outside of the country for all the pain and the suffering they've gone through. And so I don't know how far this can go, but I certainly have a right to propose it.
And we thank you. We thank you so much for that. I think you put things in my head, and you and I have become partners in crime behind the scene in many things. So we thank you so much for your input in that. Professor, if for no other reason, to make the government squirm a little more in their seat, as Zoe always likes to say, for the fact that we understand and we know our rights outside of the country. So I thank you so much for always your participation and being a part of the program. I think Madam Dorothy has joined us in on the program this morning. Is she in there? Dorothy, if you are. Dorothy, hey, come on in and introduce yourself and say good morning.
Good morning, Miss Brenda.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very, very well. I'm sure you've been following the program this morning. Let you greet everybody this morning and just give us a little bit of input on how you felt about the program this morning so far.
I have been listening from the beginning. It has been a very good program. So I would like to thank you so much, both of you ladies and all of our callers. You have done a very good job. Actually, there are some things I have never even thought about in that angle of being in the diaspora and how people feel and how people get affected by this. So I would like to thank you so much for coming up with such a very good topic. You know, it covered a wide area, and I think we have a lot to learn from this. Yes.
Yes.
We do. Mm-hmm.
And go ahead. I'll let Zoe, because I know Zoe's been itching there. We've had like 2 callers, and she hasn't had a chance to respond to some of the things. So let me go to her, and we'll come back to you in just a second here, Dorothy. Zoe, go ahead and comment on, especially some of the things the professor had to say. Go ahead. About Janet Museveni living in a diaspora and exile herself and being so miserable but not understanding it with the rest of the Ugandans. Go ahead and comment.
Ms. Brenda, it's very depressing to discuss something like this, particularly for people like the Musevenis who understand the hardships of living in exile or as a refugee. But I don't think for them anybody really wanted to kill Museveni and his wife and family. Because I've just heard the professor say they even, while she was in Nairobi, part of her family could still fly from Entebbe to Nairobi, which means nobody really was looking out to kill them. Because if somebody was, they would be escaping from Uganda by road or something. Because how could they officially, and their families were already branded, how could they officially fly from Entebbe to Nairobi? So these are people whose lives they left to go because they had plans of how they wanted to come back to Uganda in years to come. Because Museveni had always had this ambition, and he was just looking for people whom he could use to achieve his ambition of becoming a president. And so his wife and him are going to write all these books. That's why they are contradicting themselves now. You remember recently Museveni said he had been rich all the time. And his wife wrote this book of where he suffered in exile and they were miserable. They had nothing. And so they are contradicting each other because they are making stories of their lives and try to change the positions of reality of what actually happened within their families. They are pathological liars, and people understand it, and they are also people who have no feelings for others, even if they understand how painful it is to live outside your country. That is what they want you to feel. They want you outside that country to feel the pain and suffering wherever you are, not because they suffered it, but because they want to inflict that pain on people. They would do anything to inflict that pain on anybody they feel is a threat to them. And so for them, they understand it and they know it, but they didn't experience it, because Museveni on one hand says he was very rich from being a young person, and so they had all this money to their exposure when they were living outside. But the wife says the contrary, and so it's only the two of them who knows really what happened. But for us who know, we know that they are liars and they have done this all their lives. And the other thing, Miss Brenda, I wanted to bring in, which Lawrence spoke about earlier on, when he was talking about, and also Sam, and Mr. Musan, I think, spoke about it, what was happening on the streets. And for me, I'm looking at what was in the papers. Every time Uganda is on high alert for terrorism, the headline is the U.S. wants. Museveni says, I don't care for the U.S., I can work with Russia and China. But when he wants attention on terrorism, he tries, they say, the U.S. wants. And so he wants to show the public that he doesn't care for the U.S., but the U.S. will always be running to his rescue whenever he talks about terrorism. And I think this point has to come out very clearly. I don't know if both are playing the game, Museveni and the U.S. per se, but I think Museveni here wants always to show that whatever he does, he can abuse, he can say all the things he wants, he can torture his own community, he can make them suffer, whether within Uganda or outside Uganda. But whatever happens because of the terrorism agenda, that he will never be abandoned by the U.S. And I want to go back to that point, that the U.S., we in the diaspora can make the U.S. and the West know that we can have a better leader in Uganda who will serve the interests of Ugandans, like in the new Uganda, and also the interest of the West. And we need that kind of ally, not somebody who is causing all the mayhem back home and torturing their own people. And I also want to talk about the suffering in the diaspora. You heard Professor Mubiru talking about my sad story, which I spoke about last week. I'm not going to repeat it. And you also heard Kalnam Magezi talking about it earlier. Of course, I don't think I made a choice to come outside of this kind of Uganda, not because I was in comfort in Uganda, but because I had my family. I had so many children that I was taking care of, my over 100 children who were even featured on Oprah's show. Leaving those children was like cutting my umbilical cord. And even if it was like Professor Mubiru was saying, even if I was living here in comfort, even if I had all the money and everything here, I would still not feel the same, because I'm a mother to those children. Which mother doesn't want to be with her kids? My ailing old mother is still there. I buried my father in 2003. And what will happen? I may not be able to bury my mother. So these pains will never go away. And I don't think I can forgive Museveni for that, for forcing me outside of my country. I can live in my village. I could plan. I may not be in politics. I may not be working, but I would be able to live in that village, sit under that mango tree, sit with my old mother, mother my children, live with my community. Why should I be out here when I should be in Uganda? And so these stories tell you the pain of how much you have to transition in cultures and environments that are not your own. That is me, who has traveled widely to over 50 countries in the world, What about somebody who just lives in Uganda and moves here and has never been to another country, or moves to England or Britain, moves to Australia and they have never been to another country, goes to Kuwait? You have seen two Ugandans were actually executed in China, and the reason is that they trafficked drugs. They went out there not because they enjoyed going out there. And who are these drug lords in Uganda who are sending out these young people? They can never speak out because the big people in Kampala who are doing this business know themselves. And so Ugandans have been put into very many difficult situations. But as a diaspora, we have a voice. We can come together. We can unite. And we can do it. And last week, Miss Brenda, I spoke about this. In Lingala, I said there's the lice. You know, the lice, the pubic lice, which sticks onto the pubis and sucks the blood of its victim. And it is called Magolo Mwambi. Magolo are legs, Mwambi is 8. That lice has 8 legs. Those legs are stuck into your skin, and they suck your blood, and that is whom 7 is. Not only with those 8 legs is he sucking the blood of Ugandans back home, he's doing it for the Ugandans who are also in exile and in the diaspora. Yeah. And it's time we just shave these stupid lies off our pubis. It's enough. We have had enough, and we cannot have this anymore. And people have to come together and make sure that we fight and go back and lead our country, give it democracy, give it good governance, give it sustainable economy. We lead this country and give it hope for the future and liberty and independence. We just celebrated 4th of July. I was sitting here and I'm just like, I went to watch the fireworks with friends, and I'm like, when can my country have this? When will my country ever have this kind of celebration, knowing that, you know, we deserve each other, knowing that we deserve a country where we can have diversity of opinion, we can have diversity of thinking, but we come together because it's our country. And me, I like the idea which Professor just brought of suing that government, and particularly now when Kutesa actually is going to be the president of the UN. We should sue that government now and put more pins in that chair, more needles in that chair for Kutesa. And I think we should come together and sue that government for the pain they have caused us.
Yeah, I agree, and that was a comment I was trying to make before I got snapped off there. Before I go to Dorothy, let me say this. Suing the government for compensation for being exiled outside of your country is definitely something that we're going to start to look into and move forward. Just like when we tried to keep Sam Kutesa out of the chair there at the United Nations Assembly, we make our voices heard. And we have to continue to make our voices heard, whether it goes all the way or whether it stops at a certain point. We make history by going forward and no longer living in silence and in fear as to what this President Museveni and all those he sends out can do. Dorothy, you are one of those people in exile that has the weight of the world on your shoulder. I know because of family members that you have. Come on in on the conversation and just share a little bit of that with us, if you would.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda. All our listeners on our Bakoko. Let me tell you, Ms. Brenda, at first I thought, you know, when we talk about exile and the way people come, of course it is different ways. Some people have been able to sit back and plan and have a plan and a starting point, ABCD. Some people, it's not like that. They don't even have a minute to think about it, but all what they are worried about is their lives. And somehow they make it. When I first came here, I had a few things in mind. It would be like if I managed to get, some kind of work, go back to school, get all my needs straightened out, and I would be fine. And in my prayers, I remember praying, and if that was done, I was going to be good, work hard, take responsibility. It never occurred to me that one point, if I got done with this, something else has to come forward. So with all, whatever I needed, the good Lord provided. But then I started having this too much pain. At first, there was a little bit of leeway where people worked. They would call you to say, how are you? But as time went on, people were becoming very, very desperate. I found out that me as myself, I could not be able to support my family. All those good friends I had, those who called for years just to check on me, not to ask anything, then I realized something was happening and it was horrible. Not that I didn't know, I knew. But that was, to me, a big thing that opened my eyes. Okay? When people could no longer afford to take children to school, they can't afford to get food to eat. When people kept asking for capital, and then they come back in tears, our market is on fire. My building was put on fire. So diaspora is not easy, Miss Brenda. But the way the Ugandan children have been lowered into diaspora is really, really very sad. And there is also another angle to this, that people are running away from this terror. But do you know that we've been inflicted in here? Do you know that people have been assassinated in diaspora? Do you know people have been poisoned? Do you know that our organizations have been disorganized on purpose? Do you know that every little thing we try to do here in diaspora, Museveni is busy infringing and trying to make sure we don't do anything. But my fellow Ugandans, we can't do. There is another part, Honorable Zoe just mentioned, of those people who were executed in China. Okay? Salim Saleh is here holding a multi-billion business of cocaine. Agnes Nakamia, whenever you are, you don't want to be a mother, a woman walking on the street. Because Miss Brenda, Salim Saleh and Museveni, they can't do what they do without these people helping them. Some time back, we had a lady found in the bathroom dead. What did they autopsy? She was filled with drugs in her abdomen. But people like Nakamia take on Salim Saleh's contract. God wills it, I will not keep quiet because I can speak. I have a freedom here to speak. And that's why it is my responsibility to give back. Now, Salim Saleh, you use people like Nakamia. Nakamia, you are not retarded. You understand very well, okay? The Ugandan children are so poor that when given a chance, you can imagine what comes in somebody's head offered a ticket to go to China. But what are the conditions? You take the drugs. Do you understand?
Yes.
Now they are executed, they are dead. Nakamia, you are busy back in Kampala, continuing Salim Saleh's business. Salim Saleh is busy enjoying life. But these people have stolen so much. Is really this needed? You can hear Bisasa remanded in Kenya here on remand because caught with Salim Saleh's cocaine, billions and billions of dollars. You can hear Ugandans stranded in Kuwait sold as slaves in Iraq. What kind of exile is this that these people are making us go through? This is a different kind of diaspora. For these people, because we are in different categories. And so my fellow Ugandans, we get up and do what is right. When a man like Salim Saleh, you wake up one day, and suddenly you took over power, and you decided every natural resource underground, Salim Saleh has a right on it. You have done so well killing people in Karamoja, disarming them, taking away their cows. You have killed women with babies on their backs. You are busy mining gold in Karamoja. Then do you need to kill another Ugandan so that you give him cocaine to take to China? They execute them for you. You are sitting, enjoying life. And we keep quiet. What kind of exile is this? How was Uganda before Museveni? How is it after? Or for the past 28 years?
Yes.
So we people in the diaspora, because there are those who don't have a voice. You have heard the clips. Voice of Uganda Radio, they have done a good job. You have had women stranded. And also, Honorable Bakoko, you can comment on that because my understanding, Salim Saleh owns that company, which ships children to Iraq, Afghanistan, and to go work in the U.S. camps. But they are also responsible for, Salim Saleh is the one who owns that company, where girls have been shipped in Iraq, sold them off as slaves. Quiet. Did I hear that was it a mama's daughter who is carrying on this big business, lowering girls into prostitution in Malaysia and other countries? And on top of that, they are also involved in this business of when girls are lied to, they are offered a job, they get there, they wake up without their organs. How far can I go? How much can we talk? Please, fellow Ugandans, if you are the kind of a person who are in the diaspora, yes, you worked hard. Yes, you suffered. Yes, it is not easy. Yes, it is very painful. Yes, we are tortured. But please, at this particular point in time, if you are somewhere, you can hold a job, you can work. Please, we need to unite. We need to work as a group. Please support the good cause. Uganda at one time was called the Pearl of Africa. And we can make that dream come true. Please, there is no end to these people. They are so good that sometimes it doesn't make sense. As yesterday somebody asked me, does Salim Saleh needs to do this drug trafficking to make sure innocent people are killed? Does he really need to? They have stored tons and tons of money, billions and billions of dollars. Does this money need to do this? But these were the people who had nothing. The greed will never end. We have a pit in Uganda. However much money you put in there, you'll never be able to fill this pit. So unless we get up and reclaim our country, please, because those who are living in Uganda right now, they suffer more than we in the diaspora. In some cases, please, if you are in diaspora, you can give up one bottle of beer a day. You can give up 2 pieces of chicken a day and support the cause. Let us do the right thing. Miss Brenda, when this topic came about, I did not understand how sensitive, how painful this would be. But I hope now you understand, because we have driven back way back in the 1500s, 1600s, the way this is slavery.
Yes.
This is slavery. So we have to do something about it.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you so much for the compassion that you have in everything that you have to share. You know, when I decided that we needed to do a show on exile, and the Honorable Zoe Bakoko and I started it off on Wednesday on the American Connection. And then after that show was over, we realized that we needed to extend it even into our bigger audience and bring it into Sunday. The American people have compassion on a level that you will never understand for the Ugandan people and what they're going through. These type of topics and the things that we try to discuss on this radio program is to open the eyes and the hearts and the minds of the American people and anyone in the free world that tunes in and listens to these programs. One of the things I always want the Ugandan people to know, not just the ones inside Uganda, but those who are living in the diaspora, is that we understand, we know, and we feel your pain. I have many acquaintances in U.S. That are living in the diaspora. A lot of the compassion I have, and the reason I had to come on board with Voice of Uganda Radio for the movement into the new Uganda was for that simple reason. You cannot hear the stories and not be moved. And I don't mean being moved to bring about change or help the people to move themselves forward, but it moves you with a compassion that you cannot explain because it is tearful. I could not imagine how I would be outside of my own country if I lived somewhere else and had to rely on the generosity and the compassion of other people to help me to sustain myself and to move forward. People in the diaspora come into these countries that they're in, wherever they may be in the free world, with fear and anxiety. They have many trust issues because they have trusted to the degree that they can trust no more. And then they have to learn to expand their hearts and their minds again to start to trust people, to start to open up and to know that it is okay, that those wounds need to be laid bare before the world so that the world can see and understand with a compassionate heart, so that we get on board like we did when South Africa started their movement to free Nelson Mandela. It is those type of heart-wrenching things that opens the heart and the minds of people to become charitable, to give, to donate, to move people forward. I don't remember who said it in the program earlier that some people it may have been the Honorable Zoe Bakoko. Some people are exiled in places that are not as kind, that are not as nice, that they don't have some of the luxuries that others have. Some people in their exile want to be seen differently because they don't want to associate with the hurt and the pain that has caused them to be where they're at. So they start to become more of where they live and what's around them than the culture in which they grew and lived. The professor said it very profoundly when he said that the individual there from Russia, that after everything had taken place, even though he bought a home here, he established himself, he had money, his country of birth is where his heart always lied and always was, and he knew that someday he would get back to that place. I share that with you off of the wingtips of the professor to say this: do not give up on your beloved Uganda. Uganda is there, and there is room for all of us to re-enter back into Uganda and make it whole and make it the pearl of Africa in which it once was. Some people now still say in the outside world that Uganda is a pearl of Africa, but I bid them go and visit this pearl that you think is the pearl of Africa and see the atrocities and the things that are happening to the people. There is in no country that people should be sold off in slavery or any other form of life to sustain, as Dorothy just elegantly put, this money pit. A money pit that will never be full. That they will sell off the Ugandan people. When you think in terms of the population there, at 32 million plus, these people think nothing of the lives of these people, and they use them as a commodity to get where they want to get and to do what they want to do. These two individuals that were used to take into Russia to sell drugs, they were used as an experiment to see if this man could get something through. And at the point he saw that he couldn't, now he has to rethink it. But he thought nothing of the lives of these individuals, how it would impact those of us in the diaspora. Now we're talking about it on the radio in front of thousands of people in the diaspora as to how these individuals were used, their families that were thankful that they were getting out of the country and somehow would be able to contribute back into the livelihood of their family members. And this has affected a lot of people. And this is what we want the government to know. Zoe put it very eloquently that we have to continue in the diaspora to speak out in your community. We pound the pavement in Washington, D.C. We would like to think that some of the things that are happening, even to Katessa being sitting on pins and needles in his chair there in the UN, we'd like to think that we have something to do with that, even if on a small scale. We exhaust every measure and any opportunity that any door is open to us here in the United States of America. And we will continue to do that because we have to. The stories that we hear, these are real people. These are real lives. These are not, Zoe's story is real. You walk away and you leave 100 children, a lot in which you've adopted, but some that are your very own. And you're supposed to come into another country and find happiness and find peace and find a way of surviving and moving forward. How can you ask a person to do that? And we will exhaust the measures that the professor brought up. Compensation for those of you who are living in the diaspora. compensation for those of you who are refugees, compensation for those of you who have been misplaced in a country that has not been so welcoming and has not embraced you with open arms, and yet you had to maneuver the waters and find your way anyway. We will exhaust the measures to see how we bring this to the attention of the nations, for no other reason but to put Uganda on alert that you can no longer treat the people this way, whether they're inside the walls of Uganda or whether they're outside the walls of Uganda. We have to make a stand for everyone, for justice, for liberty, for democracy, for the Ugandan people. Zoe put it beautifully when she said how we just celebrated independence here in the United States of America. It's a time when we all come together and we're happy and we celebrate as one. And we remember all the things that got us to this day, all the lives that were lost, all the people who came back crippled and maimed for whatever they went through to bring us to this day. In Uganda, when they celebrated their independence, it was a group of people that celebrated the independence for all the people of Uganda. How can that possibly be? Where were the other 32 plus million people in Uganda? How were they celebrating it? How were they brought to be a part of the independence of Uganda? My fellow Ugandans, anything that we do, anything that we work towards to bring Uganda back to a wholeness, we, with Federal Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda, we here at Voice Uganda Radio, we here in the Western world and the American people, the people in the United Kingdom, in Freedom and Unity Front, and everywhere that are fighting for the rights and the causes for the Ugandan people, we understand and we know what happens in Uganda when we go back into a new Uganda happens on a temporary basis while we gather the millions of people in Uganda, those that are in the diaspora, and start to give them a voice to vote and elect the people they want in office, to vote and elect for the Uganda that they want to see come to be. I've already exhausted my 5 minutes of my closing here for the program. I'll go ahead and give Zoe her time to finish up her closing argument. We'll go to Dorothy, and then I will go ahead and close out the program. The Honorable Zoe Bakoko, go ahead.
You have summarized well, Ms. Brenda, and I just wanted to say that from Museveni government, the level of greed for money, the bottomless pit where they want so much money, is just something which nobody can recognize. It probably is filling up for what they didn't have when they were younger, that they just love to have money so much that to the extent where they are willing to go and do these horrible things like trafficking young girls and boys for sex, like trafficking drugs and sending out all these young people. China has close to 100 young Ugandans who are in the jails. The first 2 have just been executed, and we don't know how many more will be executed. And the argument was that many countries would go out and negotiate. Museveni said he would rather work with China. If he can work with China, is it impossible for him to negotiate with China not to execute those people and just send them back and put them in jails in Uganda to serve term, and then after that release them? He cannot, no country can stand by and see its own citizens being killed by another country and not even say a word. And so for me, I think, like Miss Dorothy was saying, they don't want those people to come back, because if they came back to Uganda or they were sent to other countries, they probably will speak out. The same thing they threatened Miss Rose Brungi, who was the culture minister of Toro, who was arrested in London with drugs. She was the personal secretary to Salim Saleh. How could she and her partner Rajiv, who has also been arrested and jailed here in America for trafficking drugs. And this briefcase which Rajiv came with to the United States was supposed to belong to a Nigerian, and he left it. He was a visitor of Salim Saleh, and he forgot the briefcase in Salim Saleh's house. And he just gave it to Rajiv to bring it to the U.S., and then Rajiv was arrested with cocaine in a full briefcase, and he didn't know about it. These poor people are victims of these drug muggles who are there with the power and protection of government because they're in charge and they can treat everybody the way they want. And deliberately they create a situation of joblessness and unemployment among the youth so that they can use these young people to traffic their drugs, to traffic them for sex, and to traffic their arms, and even do organ trafficking. It is a sad situation. How much will that government destroy its own citizens? And so Ugandans, whether in Uganda or abroad, it is time you stop these issues of trust. How many people in this country that in the diaspora, not ordinary people, Ugandans, but people who understand, who even would not want to speak to me when they are told that, can you please contact Bakoko? They will say, no, I cannot speak to that woman. Is it a matter of trust issues? What is it? Is the Museveni fear even in your mind to say that I can't speak to that lady? Or are they using you too to say I can't speak to that lady? It's time we wake up and realize that we have a common enemy. It's not about Bakoko. It's not about you. It's about our country and someone who is running and ruining that country down. And if we don't come together and act, what is going to happen? The country is going to dogs. And so these issues of trust among which we allow Museveni to sow discord among ourselves in the diaspora, you are here, you can speak up. And so how will Museveni send somebody to poison you? Of course he does, but you have to understand we cannot continue to be his slave and hostage. Museveni is going another step. He even wants to change the national anthem. That is the kind of legacy. He cannot build roads. He cannot improve the healthcare system. He cannot improve the education system. There is a high level of unemployment for the youth. He is torturing the population, but he can spend money in changing the national anthem. Because he still feels that the national anthem, which was developed by an individual, is a legacy of some government which he doesn't want to recognize. He wants people to know him only. He even does not want people to know the name Uganda. He wants to change it because it is synonymous with the Buganda. He does not want that. And I don't know what he wants to call Uganda now. And he's fighting so hard, and they are going to bring all this in the constitutional reform. So Ugandans have to wake up. By the time you realize it, you won't even know what your country is. And that Pearl of Africa is going. They are getting all the money from all the wars they are starting so that they can go and get money from the US, from Britain, from France, to support them, whether they're in Somalia, whether they're in Congo, whether they're in Sudan. They are stealing all the money. The poor soldiers are not even getting what they deserve. How much can your right be abused? I think the most honorable thing we can do is to unite. Come together and unite and fight and get our rightful place in our country as we deserve it, and nobody should take that away from us. Dorothy asked one question. I will end on that. She said, this business which is being run by Salim Saleh and Mbabazi's daughter to export people. The exportation of labor policy, which was developed by me in my ministry, was supposed to help young Ugandans go out and work. The purpose was, I had been in Sudan and some of these China and Arab countries where they wanted to people to teach English. Some of these young people, from this country, they are going to countries like Japan. They work in countries like China to teach English. You know that the Philippines, they don't have natural resources except their human resource. These were the reasons why we developed the exportation of labor policy, so that we could export our human resource and earn money from it. But today, Museveni and his brother and his sister-in-law, they just grabbed that opportunity, and his son-in-law, Drake, they formed their own companies which is exporting labor, and instead of exporting real labor, they're sending people out to go and traffic drugs and do sex trafficking. How low can people sink? Yes. And turn everything just because they're in power? We need to take that power away from those people in the new Uganda. And I know that the new Uganda will offer better opportunities for all Ugandans. And then we can be able to go home and enjoy our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and always for your compassion and love for the country. We're winding down here. We don't have long, so Dorothy, go ahead and do your closing arguments, and I'll close out the program.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda, Honorable Bakoko, our listeners. Gentlemen in the studio, we love you so much for your hard work. My closing argument is I'm going to appeal to you, my fellow Ugandans, our friends, well-wishers, supporters, whenever you are. We need to put on a fight. Our enemy is working so hard. You have seen it. You have seen and heard how he's trying to divide and rule, how he's trying to convince the world that the Muslims are killing Christians in Uganda, whereas he's the one doing it. Why is he doing it? He wants money from the West. Nigeria is getting money. And then, when the Christians start fighting Muslims in Uganda, we won't focus on him anymore. So please, keep your eyes open and work so hard for the poor Ugandans. Second point, Either Museveni brought these camouflage soldiers with the AK-47, either to attract the attention of the West or to terrorize Ugandans and scare them to death. It doesn't make sense either. There is no reason why you have those guys dressed like that when they are looking for terrorists who are supposed to be at Entebbe when they are in Kampala and Masaka. Secondly, Honorable Zoe, Miss Brenda, I would think that these people looking for terrorists whenever they are, maybe you can even leave the point of the location. They're supposed to be agents dressed up in civilian clothes doing their work. So this kind of stupidity, and intimidation, my fellow Ugandans, you get up. You brought this man in power. You worked so hard to do so. You sacrificed everything. So we do the same way to get him out. It is the time. Mm-hmm. We do the right thing, the honorable thing. Both of us abroad and in Uganda. We will get up and do the work. On the other note, I would like to thank my fellow Ugandans who are working so hard in terrible conditions in Uganda, whatever it means. There are some people who are working, and on that note, don't forget Robert and Norman. They are still in Ruzira prison. Protesting is a right, and there is no reason why these boys are still in the prison. And for you, my fellow youth, whenever you are, and the Ugandans, don't stay put. You need to think the way those boys did think and do something. We get up, we fight for Uganda. Thank you so much, Miss Brenda, and all our listeners. We love you.
Thank you so much. To the Honorable Zoe Bakoko and Dorothy, thank you so much for hosting this program with me on this Sunday. Your compassion rings loud and clear. We know it because of the calls and the conversations that we've been able to have. it was a emotional and a compassionate topic which we needed to talk about, and it has opened some doors of some other things that may move us in another direction. Wherever you're at, give. Just give and be a part of the new Uganda. You have to lay down your weapons and start to trust. You have to trust in what we're trying to do in these organizations to move us into a new Uganda. We can no longer continue to be manipulated through the tactics that President Museveni has used time and time and time again on the Ugandan people. We are smarter than that out in the diaspora. We will make our brothers and sisters smarter and more aware of that in the walls of Uganda. Thank you so much for being a part of Voice Uganda Radio and being with us for this first lineup here on this beautiful Sunday that will continue with lots of other programs that will follow us on this Sunday. Thank you so much from Voice Uganda Radio. Miss Brenda here with with Freedom at Hand, Madam Dorothy and the Honorable Zoe Bakoko. Have a great Sunday, and thank you so much for making us a part of your listening day.